Good morning. The first item of business is general questions. In order to get in as many members as possible, I'd be grateful for short and succinct questions and responses. And at question number 1, I call Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is available to taxi drivers in Glasgow to help them comply with the low emission zone.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
There has been comprehensive support provided to help the taxi trade adapt to low emission zones. £3.4 million has been provided through the LEZ Retrofit Fund for taxi operators in the Glasgow region to upgrade their existing vehicles. Over 400 taxis have been retrofitted to the LEZ emission standard as a result. The LEZ Support Fund also provides a cash scrappage grant for micro businesses, and over 700 vehicles in the Glasgow region have been disposed of through the scheme, many of which are taxi operators. The Switched On Taxis loan has provided over £5.5 million in interest-free loans since 2016 to support Glasgow-based Hackney and private hire operators to purchase both new and used electric taxis.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Taxi drivers in Glasgow are keen to play their part in the transition to net zero, but at present they're struggling to access some support to comply with the low emission zone in the city, particularly with the liquidation of Vehicle Repowering Solutions, one of only 2 companies which offered a clean vehicle retrofit accreditation scheme. I previously wrote to the Cabinet Secretary to raise taxi drivers' concerns, but the issue is still remaining. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, would she meet with me and representatives of the taxi industry to address these concerns?
Cabinet Secretary.
So we proactively dealt, as a member would know from previous correspondence, with those taxi drivers themselves. The taxi operators that had a retrofit grant offer for LPG conversion were given the option at the time of that problem with the supplier to change to an alternative taxi retrofit supplier, and some operators have already taken up this offer. The Energy Saving Trust wrote to all affected operators at the time, invited any taxi operators facing a loss of deposit to contact them if they were unable to reclaim their deposit. However, none did so. And there's also further time-limited exemptions to LEZ enforcement that were offered by Glasgow City Council to affected taxi operators. I am concerned if there's still continuing issues, notwithstanding what's already happened. So if the member could write to me with the illustrations of what the continuing issues are, we can identify what's the best resolution and a meeting if necessary. But as I said, there's been proactive work by the Energy Saving Trust and Glasgow City Council on this specific issue.
Brief supplementary, Sue Webber.
Thank you. Last month, Cabinet Secretary, Glasgow City Council announced a consultation that could ultimately see the current cap on cab numbers scrapped, retained or reviewed. Considering the LEZ has already undermined Glasgow's late-night economy, does the Cabinet Secretary accept that a reduction in cab numbers may further damage the sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly the issue of licensing of taxi drivers is an issue for local authorities. I don't assume that the Conservatives want to centralise that. I do think there is an issue in terms of footfall in that earlier this year, it was, or earlier in the 2024, it was recognised that there hadn't been a reduction in footfall in Glasgow, that any subsequent reduction in footfall may have happened as a result of cost of living or other issues. I do recognise, however, that unlike other major cities in Scotland, Glasgow City Council does not have an age limit on taxis, and as a result there is a higher proportion of older non-compliant taxis in the Glasgow fleet for a variety of different reasons. It's different experiences in different cities. I do think that those issues are best addressed by Glasgow City Council themselves, but I recognise her concern in raising them.
Question number 2, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reported calls from constituents to save local government services, in light of reports that some services across Banffshire and Buchan Coast are under threat of closure.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Scottish Government has increased local government funding to record levels, and if the Scottish Government is supported by opposition parties and passes, Aberdeenshire Council will receive their formula share of over £1 billion of additional funding for local government. That would deliver an increase for the Council of 7.4%, helping them to maintain services across Banffshire and Buchan Coast without the need for big increases in council tax. However, local authorities have their own powers and responsibilities, and it's for locally elected councillors to make decisions on how best to utilise the total funding available to deliver services for their local communities.
Karen Adam.
I thank the Minister for that answer and I welcome that extra investment for our public services. It was a pleasure before Christmas to have worked with community activists across Banffshire and Buchan Coast to fight the proposed closures of libraries across the North East. And we were initially delighted when the Conservative administration of Murray Council announced a U-turn on their proposed closure of Cullen Library, but were crushed only hours later when they U-turned on their U-turn. Libraries are more than just buildings. They are a lifeline for many. What more can we do to ensure essential public services like libraries are protected?
Minister.
The Scottish Government places great importance on public libraries and we believe everyone should have access to library services. And of course, while it's for locally elected councillors to manage their day-to-day business and decision-making processes, any decision around public libraries must be considered extremely carefully, and local authorities should continue to work in partnership with communities to explore new ways of delivering essential frontline services based on local needs.
Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you. Good morning, Presiding Officer. A number of my constituents in the North East region, including those in Banff and Buchan, have contacted me with concerns about the impact of local government funding on local services. In particular, the issue of library closures in Aberdeenshire has been repeatedly raised with me in response to reports that branches may close due to supposed reduced footfall. I cannot stress enough to the Minister how crucial public libraries are to our communities and that they must be protected. So does the Minister agree that meaningful public consultation is vital before any decisions are taken on library closures?
Minister.
I absolutely agree with the member on the critical importance of public libraries and certainly in my own constituency in Glasgow I recognise the value that they add to the local community and I would agree that ensuring that the local community has been adequately consulted on any changes is an essential part of any changes that local authorities might want to make with regard to provision of library services.
Question number 3, Stephen Kerr.
The Scottish Government what plans it has to reform planning regulations to enable the construction of new nuclear power stations.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
The Scottish Government's position on traditional fission nuclear energy is clear. We do not support the building of any new nuclear power stations in Scotland under current technologies. New nuclear power would take years, if not decades, to become operational and comes at a high cost. Instead, the significant growth in renewables,
Cabinet Secretary. When the Cabinet Secretary is responding, I would be grateful if members would listen as a matter of courtesy. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Instead, the significant growth in renewables, storage, hydrogen and carbon capture provides the best pathway to net zero by 2045 and will deliver affordable, resilient and clean energy supplies for Scotland.
Stephen Kerr.
Oh, what a dreadful answer that was. We really need a Scottish Government that sees nuclear energy as the crucial clean energy technology it is, not one that denies science.
Let's hear Mr Kerr.
Not one that denies science. Yep. I recently listened to young Scots apprentices in the nuclear sector, and they were a highly impressive group of young people. They said they were going to have to move away from Scotland and take their skills to other parts of the United Kingdom if they wanted to pursue their careers. Yeah. Why is the Minister prepared to say goodbye to these highly skilled young people? And how is any of our characteristic negativity on this issue in Scotland's national interest?
Cabinet Secretary.
The nuclear workers in Scotland are highly skilled people who have extremely transferable skills that will be indispensable for the energy sector as a whole in Scotland. However, I think we can be assured that they will not be moving to Hinkley Point, estimated to cost £18 billion originally, now estimated to be £46 billion, meant to be complete in 2017, now expected 2031 at the earliest, hardly the advertisement for nuclear.
Question number 4, Finlay Carson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to invest in frontline primary health care to support rural pharmacies.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This Government continues to support community pharmacies, including rural pharmacies, by delivering the largest ever increase to funding 2 years in a row. This has delivered a total of £422 million in guaranteed funding for community pharmacies across Scotland in this financial year. In addition, there is a guaranteed minimum target income for essential small pharmacies, most of which are rural, and a pharmaceutical needs waiting payment, which acknowledges both demographics and deprivation associated with the patient's postcode, both of which help support rural pharmacies by ensuring they are not disadvantaged because of their location.
Finlay Carson.
For a response, many operators in my constituency say their reserves have been wiped out as medicine tariffs paid by NHS Scotland have failed to keep pace with rapidly increasing costs of medicine, resulting in pharmacists effectively having to subsidise NHS medicines out of their own pocket. We know community pharmacies provide a vital service with increasing demand in remote rural areas, and these pharmacies are hugely valued public service operated by private contractors, and they've been underfunded constituencies in recent years. Many face an accumulative £20,000 to £30,000 a year increase in operating costs as the new minimum wage and national insurance rates kick in with no internal mechanism to absorb these increases. In light of these funding pressures, will the Minister set out what support the Scottish Government will provide community pharmacies and consider an option for the NHS exemption and national insurance contributions to be applied to NHS contractors?
I thank Mr Carson for his question, and before I respond to him, I would like to thank community pharmacies across Scotland for the work they do within their communities all year round, and especially at this time of year. They are an integral part of supporting people through the winter from both preventative care perspective and also providing a wide range of pharmaceutical services. I meet very regularly with Community Pharmacy Scotland, and payments are a constant agenda point. I've taken to write to NSS with regard to their frustrations in receiving payments, but as I pointed out in my original answer, we have had a very good funding settlement for the last 2 years with Community Pharmacy Scotland from the Scottish Government.
Brief supplementary, Jackie Dunbar.
I recognise that addressing issues in rural pharmacy care, primary care, is a key priority for the Scottish Government. Can the Minister outline how primary care services such as pharmacies will be supported in the upcoming Scottish budget, and will she join me in encouraging colleagues from all parties across this chamber to support the budget for these plans come to fruition?
Minister.
I thank Jackie Dunbar for her question and, yes, agree wholeheartedly with her final point. I think it's important to point out that the Scottish Government is investing record amounts in primary care and is on track to deliver our commitment of increasing primary care funding by 25%. Our 25-26 budget includes over £2.2 billion investment in primary care services, and plans for reform across the sector will take into account service needs within rural and island communities. We remain committed to investing in the National Centre for Remote and Rural Health and Care. Our ongoing negotiations with Community Pharmacy Scotland, as I have indicated to Mr Carson, will ensure that the needs of rural community pharmacies are taken into consideration in future settlements.
Question number 5, Sue Webber.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to strengthen Scotland's ferry fleet over the coming year.
Secretary.
The ferry fleet will be strengthened with the delivery and deployment of 6 new major vessels from early 2025, starting with the Glen Sannox. We will also be progressing the procurement of 7 new electric vessels and retaining a resilience vessel to cover planned and unplanned outages. These improvements form part of the over £530 million to operate, maintain and enhance our ferry networks as set out in the 2025-2026 draft budget.
Sue Webber.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. It's recently been revealed that over £7 million has been spent on the MV Caledonian Isles since it went into dry dock last year, and it will not be back into service until March 25. This vessel is 32 years old. Does the Cabinet Secretary think it's acceptable that we're still having to rely on these old creaking vessels, bearing in mind long-promised new ferries continue to be delayed?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the fact that we've got 6 new major vessels entering service, we've got 7 new electric vessels being procured, I think is a demonstration that we know we need to provide greater resilience in the fleet with new ferries. That is what we're doing, and that doesn't cover the second session of the second SVRP2 in terms of the small vessel replacement, the additional procurement that will happen. These vessels are important to our islanders. We're investing £500 £130 million will be in the draft budget to secure and maintain our ferry networks. I hope that's something that can give people confidence that we are investing and supporting our islands communities, and it's in the draft budget, and I hope the Conservatives can bring themselves to support it.
Brief supplementary, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary for the most recent progress update on the MV Indal, MV Claymore and MV Lochmore? What specific improvements will these new vessels make on the routes they will serve, and how will their addition to the fleet improve the ferry network as a whole?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the latest update from CMAL has indicated that delivery of these vessels from the Kimmery Yard is expected to follow in 4 monthly intervals after the delivery of the MV Isle of Isla, which will be the first. These vessels will be deployed on the Isla and the Little Minch routes over the coming years, and along with the ongoing port improvement works we're investing in, will significantly improve services for island residents, visitors and businesses. The increase in capacity, in particular HGV capacity on the Isla route, will ease current pressures and help sustain economic growth. The additional vessel on the Little Minch routes during the summer period will increase capacity and also enhance cover for the wider fleet during the winter overhaul period.
Brief supplementary, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. Well, the additional funding in the draft budget for ferry services in Orkney is, of course, welcome. It falls short of what will be needed to allow the procurement of new ferries in Orkney to be undertaken. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary for an assurance that she will lend her support to efforts to get that shortfall made up, so that new ferries desperately needed in my constituency can indeed be procured?
Secretary.
I certainly, and certainly when I was a Minister and I visited Orkney, I was made very well aware of the issues and concerns of the Council-run ferry service and the importance of supporting that. You'll be aware that the Government has, in recent years, increased the servicing support and the maintenance for the revenue side of that fleet, but clearly there are big challenges facing the Council, and I am very interested in lending my support where I can to ensure that Orkney Council can progress the improvements that it does have to make to ensure that they have a resilient ferry fleet.
Question number 6, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the impact of the increase in employers' national insurance contributions on the public and third sectors in Scotland.
Minister Ivy McKee.
The Scottish Government published estimates of the impact of the increase in employer national insurance contributions on the public sector in Scotland on the 20th of November last year. These estimates indicate the combined impact on the public sector and commissioned services is over £700 million. If the UK Government's reported allocation is all that is provided, that will mean the Chancellor will be short-changing services the Scottish public depend on by over £400 million.
Kevin Stewart.
I thank the Minister for that answer, Presiding Officer. Labour's employers' national insurance hike is a tax on jobs and will have a major impact on the delivery of services. Third sector organisations are facing massive bills, with VSA in Aberdeen having to find a whopping £468,000 to cover their additional national insurance bill. Can I ask the Minister if the UK Government has given any indication that they will cover all of the additional national insurance costs of the public and third sector in Scotland, or are they content to let jobs and vital services wither on the vine?
Minister.
The Treasury must fully fund the actual cost for Scotland's public sector and not just give a much lower value Barnett share of spending in England. We have a range of public sector employers, including the NHS, police and local authorities, who need clarity on this to inform their spending decisions. The First Minister and the President of COSLA wrote to the Chancellor on 3 January, supported by 48 public and voluntary sector organisations, to raise concerns at the impact of the increase to employer national insurance contributions and to seek clarity on funding.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I do something rare and agree with Kevin Stewart in his condemnation of Labour's broken promises tax on jobs? But as negotiations with the Treasury continue on the compensation for national insurance liabilities, will the Minister commit to ensuring that whatever deal is reached with the Treasury, that the full, fair and proportionate amount is passed on to Scottish local councils and that they are not shortchanged by the SNP government all over again?
Minister.
Well, the member recognises that there is a gap of around £400 million there. So as and when we receive full payment from the UK Government, of course the local government allocation forms part of that, and we would of course work with COSLA to ensure that, should that full £700 million be allocated to the Scottish Government, that local authorities received their necessary share of that.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. Before we move to First Minister's question time, I invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery the Honourable Om Birla, Speaker of the Lok Sabha Parliament of India.